The insulin vial was hidden behind the loose baseboard in my son's old bedroom. When I picked it up, my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. There were 3 more tucked in there. 4 vials total. And my wife Helen doesn't have diabetes. But Vanessa does. My daughter-in-law, who'd been living in our house for the past 5 months, supposedly helping us care for Helen while she recovered from what the doctors kept calling unexplained dizzy spells and cognitive decline. I stood there in that bedroom for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, staring at those vials. The bedroom Daniel had grown up in, where Helen and I had read him bedtime stories, where he'd done his homework at that old desk by the window, where he'd packed his bags for university and promised to make us proud. The house was silent except for the sound of the ambulance siren getting closer. I'd called 911 20 minutes earlier when I found Helen unconscious on the kitchen floor, her breathing shallow, her skin cold and clammy. Again, the 3rd time this month. Let me take you back 5 months to explain how we got here. It started in March. Helen had turned 65 in February, and we'd been planning to sell our house in Calgary and move to Vancouver Island for retirement. We'd saved carefully my whole career as a high school English teacher. Between my pension, our savings, and the house Daniel had grown up in, we were sitting on just over $1.2 million. Not rich by any means, but comfortable. Enough to buy a small place near the ocean and live out our years watching the sunset over the Pacific. Then Daniel called, said he and Vanessa were having trouble, marriage on the rocks. Could they stay with us for a few months while they sorted things out? Their daughter Sophie, our 10-year-old granddaughter, needed stability during this difficult time. Of course we said yes. He was our only child. We'd do anything for him. They moved in the first week of April. Daniel had been living in Edmonton, working in oil and gas, making good money, or so we thought. But he showed up with 2 suitcases, a daughter who barely looked at us, and a wife who immediately took over our spare bedroom and started rearranging our kitchen. Helen's been having some dizzy spells. I mentioned to Daniel that first week. Nothing serious. The doctor says it's probably just her blood pressure medication needing adjustment. I'll keep an eye on her, Dad, Daniel said, putting his hand on my shoulder. Vanessa's great with medical stuff. She manages her diabetes so well, she practically knows as much as a nurse. That should have been my first warning sign. But I was just grateful to have my son home, to have my granddaughter's laughter in the house again. Sophie was quiet, withdrawn, but Helen and I figured it was just the stress of her parents fighting. The dizzy spells got worse. By late April, Helen was having them almost daily. She'd be fine one moment, then suddenly she'd grab the counter, her face going pale, her words slurring. The doctors ran tests, blood work, CT scans, MRIs. Everything came back normal, except her blood sugar, which kept dropping to dangerous levels. We're concerned about reactive hypoglycemia, Dr. Patterson told us at the appointment in early May. But given that she's not diabetic, it's unusual. We'll need to monitor her diet carefully. Vanessa jumped right in. I'll handle her meals, she said. All concerned daughter-in-law. I have to watch my own blood sugar anyway. I'll make sure Helen eats small, frequent meals with the right balance of protein and complex carbs. I should have been suspicious. But I was too busy being grateful. Too busy being the fool who thought his family was helping. Helen started losing weight. By June, she'd dropped nearly 30 pounds. She was confused often, forgetting conversations we'd just had, sometimes not recognizing Sophie when our granddaughter came into the room. Early onset Alzheimer's, Daniel said one evening when Helen had gone to bed early, exhausted from another episode. That's what it looks like, Dad. We need to face it. She's 65 years old, I said, my voice cracking. This doesn't run in her family. The doctors haven't diagnosed anything like that. The doctors don't know what they're looking for, Vanessa said, exchanging a glance with Daniel that I didn't understand then, but makes my stomach turn now. Maybe we should get her evaluated by a specialist, someone who can assess whether she's still capable of making her own decisions. That was the first time they mentioned the word incompetent. I refused to consider it. Helen was my wife of 43 years. She was having health problems, yes, but she was still Helen, still laughed at my terrible jokes, Still remembered the names of all my former students when we ran into them at the grocery store. Still knew exactly how I liked my coffee. But the episodes kept getting worse. And I was terrified. Absolutely terrified of losing her. In July, Daniel brought up the power of attorney. "Just as a precaution, Dad," he said. We were sitting in the living room, the stampede fireworks going off in the distance. "If something happens to you, someone needs to be able to handle Mom's medical decisions, her finances. I'm your son. It makes sense." "I'm not dying," I said. "Nobody thinks you are. But you're 67. What if you have a heart attack? What if you're in an accident? Mom can't handle things alone, not with her condition. Just sign the POA over to me. For both of you. I'll only use it if absolutely necessary." I signed it. God help me, I signed it. 2 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon in late July, I found Helen unconscious on the kitchen floor. That's when I called 911. That's when I started searching the house while I waited for the ambulance, looking for anything that might explain what was happening to my wife. That's when I found Daniel's bedroom door slightly ajar, the baseboard loose, and those 4 vials of insulin. The paramedics were professionals. They got Helen stabilized, got an IV in, got her blood sugar back up. In the ambulance, one of them asked me a question that made my blood run cold. "Sir, does your wife take insulin? Is she diabetic?" "No," I said. "She's not, but my daughter-in-law is." The paramedic and his partner exchanged a look. At the Foothills Medical Center, they ran tests immediately. Helen's blood sugar had been at 2.1 mmol when they found her. Normal is 4 to 7. Anything below 3 is dangerous. Below 2, you risk seizures, coma, death. She has extremely high levels of insulin in her system, Dr. Patel told me in the emergency room. Levels that don't make sense for someone who isn't taking insulin. "Mr. Morrison, I have to ask, is there any possibility your wife has been injecting herself without telling you?" "No," I said. Then I told him about the vials, about Vanessa's diabetes, about Daniel and the POA. Dr. Patel's expression changed. "We need to call the police." The Calgary Police Service sent Detective Sarah Chen. She was young, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that didn't miss anything. She took my statement, took the insulin vials I'd brought with me, and asked me one question that made everything click into place. "Mr. Morrison, has there been any recent attempt to change your wife's will or access your financial accounts?" "Daniel has POA," I said slowly, "as of 3 weeks ago, and before your wife got sick. Who was the primary beneficiary of your estate?" "We have a joint will," I said. "Everything goes to the survivor, then to Daniel when we're both gone. The house, our savings, my pension survivor benefits, just over 1.2 million total." Detective Chen nodded like I'd just confirmed something she already suspected. "I'm going to need you to check your bank accounts, Mr. Morrison. All of them. Tonight." I borrowed a hospital computer and logged into our online banking. Our joint checking account, which had held $47,000 3 weeks ago, now had $3,200. Our savings account, which had held $185,000, was down to $12,000. Our investment account, carefully built up over 40 years, had been liquidated. All $250,000 of it gone. Total missing, $466,800. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Helen was 3 floors above me fighting for her life, and our son, our only child, had been poisoning her and stealing from us. Detective Chen put her hand on my shoulder. "We're getting a warrant for your house right now. Don't go home tonight, Mr. Morrison. Is there somewhere safe you can stay?" I called my brother in Vancouver, told him everything. He wired me $2,000 and told me to get a hotel, get a lawyer, and not to talk to Daniel or Vanessa until the police said it was safe. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a cheap hotel room near the hospital, watching the news, waiting for my phone to ring. It rang at 6:47 a.m. "Daniel." "Dad, where are you? The police are here. They're searching the house. They're saying crazy things about Mom, about insulin. This is insane. You need to come home and straighten this out." "I'm not coming home," I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. I found the insulin, Daniel. I found what you did to the bank accounts. Silence. Then, Dad, I can explain. Explain how you poisoned your mother? Explain how you stole $500,000 from us? Explain that, Daniel. It's not what you think. Vanessa and I, we were going to pay it back. We had some debts, some investments that went wrong. We just needed a loan. You gave your mother insulin to make her sick, to make her look incompetent, so you could take everything. More silence. Then his voice changed. Harder. Colder. You can't prove that. The hospital has her blood work. The police have the vials. How long, Daniel? How long have you been doing this to her? He hung up. The police found more that day. In Daniel and Vanessa's bedroom, tucked in a locked drawer, they found syringes, detailed logs of insulin doses administered, emails between Daniel and Vanessa discussing the plan, and a forged will signed with Helen's name, dated 2 weeks after her incompetency evaluation, leaving everything to Daniel immediately, cutting me out entirely. They also found Sophie's diary. My granddaughter had known. She'd seen her mother drawing up the insulin, seen her father holding Helen down while Vanessa injected her. Sophie had written page after page about wanting to tell someone, being terrified, not knowing who to trust. Daniel and Vanessa were arrested that afternoon. They were charged with attempted murder, fraud, theft over $5,000, forgery, and conspiracy. The Crown prosecutor, a stern woman named Margaret Ellis, told me she was going to push for the maximum sentence. This wasn't a moment of passion, she said. This was calculated, premeditated. They planned to kill your wife over months, to make it look like natural decline, to steal your life savings and your home. This is one of the worst cases of elder abuse I've seen in 20 years. Helen was in the hospital for 2 weeks. The doctors had to carefully bring her blood sugar back to normal, repair the damage the repeated hypoglycemic episodes had done to her brain and organs. There was some permanent cognitive damage, Dr. Patel told me. Memory issues, difficulty with complex tasks. But she would live. When she was finally alert enough to understand, I had to tell her what our son had done. I'll never forget the look on her face. Not anger, not even betrayal, just profound sadness. I knew something was wrong, she whispered. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that Daniel would never hurt me. But I knew. The trial took place in November, 6 months after it all came to light. Sophie was in foster care temporarily while the case was resolved. She was too traumatized to testify in person, so the judge allowed her diary entries and a video-recorded interview. Daniel and Vanessa both pleaded not guilty. Their lawyer tried to argue that the insulin was for Vanessa's diabetes, that the money transfers were loans we'd agreed to, that Helen's health problems were coincidental. The Crown destroyed them. Dr. Patel testified about Helen's blood insulin levels, how they were consistent with external administration, not internal production. A forensic accountant traced every dollar of the stolen money to accounts in Daniel and Vanessa's names, showed the trail of forged signatures and unauthorized transfers. A handwriting expert proved the will was a forgery. And worst of all, they played the video of Sophie's interview. My 10-year-old granddaughter describing in her small, shaking voice how her mother would fill the syringe, how her father would distract me, send me on errands, get me out of the house, how they'd hold Grandma down when she fought, how Grandma would cry and ask why they were hurting her, how Sophie was told that if she said anything, Grandma would die anyway, and it would be Sophie's fault. I watched Daniel's face while that video played. He wouldn't look at the screen. Vanessa was crying. But Daniel just stared at the table in front of him, jaw clenched, refusing to show any emotion. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge was brutal. "Mr. Morrison," she said, looking at Daniel, "you systematically poisoned your own mother over a period of 5 months, causing her severe physical and psychological harm. You stole nearly $500,000 from your parents, money they'd worked their entire lives to save. You forged documents. You manipulated your own daughter into becoming an accessory to attempted murder. You showed no remorse, no conscience, no humanity." She sentenced him to 22 years in federal prison. Vanessa got 15 years for her role. The courtroom was silent. Helen gripped my hand so tightly I lost feeling in my fingers. You will have no contact with your daughter, the judge continued, until she turns 18 and chooses otherwise. You will have no contact with your parents. Upon release, you will be required to pay full restitution of all stolen funds, plus interest, plus damages. Do you have anything to say? Daniel stood. For a moment, I thought he might apologize, might show some shred of the boy I'd raised. This is a miscarriage of justice, he said. I was trying to help my parents prepare for the inevitable. My mother was declining anyway. The money was always going to be mine eventually. You're punishing me for trying to secure my family's future. Helen made a sound beside me, something between a sob and a gasp. The judge's face hardened. Remove him from my courtroom. We got some of the money back. The Crown's asset forfeiture team seized Daniel's truck, Vanessa's jewelry, some electronics they'd bought with our money. Total recovery, $89,000. The rest was gone, spent on who knows what. The house we'd planned to sell, the retirement we'd planned, all of it had to be restructured around having $377,000 less than we'd thought we had. But we got Sophie. That was what mattered to Helen, what kept her going through the worst of it. The custody hearing took place 3 weeks after the sentencing. Sophie's foster parents were kind people, but they already had 4 kids. When the judge asked Sophie where she wanted to live, she looked right at us. With Grandma and Grandpa, she said, if they still want me. Always, Helen said, tears streaming down her face. Always, sweetheart. Sophie moved in with us in December. She's been with us for just over a year now. She has nightmares sometimes, wakes up crying about what she saw. We got her into therapy, good therapy, with a specialist in childhood trauma. She's doing better, started to smile again, started to trust us. Helen's health has improved, though she'll never be quite the same. She has good days and bad days. Some mornings she wakes up confused, thinks Sophie is our daughter, not our granddaughter. But most days, she's herself. We've adapted. We make lists, set reminders, take each day as it comes. The house in Calgary is sold now. We couldn't afford the mortgage and property taxes on my pension alone. We moved to a smaller place in Okotoks, a town just south of the city. 2 bedrooms, a little yard where Sophie can play. It's not Vancouver Island. It's not the retirement we'd dreamed of. But it's ours, paid for with what was left after everything. Sometimes Sophie asks about her parents. We don't lie to her. We tell her they made terrible choices, hurt people they should have protected, and now they're facing the consequences. We tell her that none of it was her fault, that she was brave to survive it, that she'll never have to see them again unless she chooses to. Yesterday was Helen's 67th birthday. We had a small party, just the 3 of us. Sophie made a cake, chocolate with vanilla icing, Helen's favorite. We sang happy birthday, made wishes, blew out the candles together. What did you wish for, Grandma? Sophie asked. Helen smiled and pulled her close. I wish that you'll always know you're loved, that you'll always be safe, that you'll grow up knowing that real family doesn't hurt each other. Real family protects each other. I watched them together, my wife and my granddaughter, and felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Not happiness, exactly, but peace, a sense that despite everything we'd lost, despite the betrayal and the pain and the money and the son we'd never see again, we still had what mattered most. We had each other. The news did a story about the case a few months ago, called it one of the worst examples of elder abuse in Alberta history. People I hadn't spoken to in years called to say they were sorry, to ask if we needed anything. Some of my former students sent cards, small donations to help with Sophie's therapy bills. The response that stuck with me most was from a woman named Patricia who'd sent an email. She said her brother had done something similar to their mother, though he hadn't been caught until after their mother had passed. She said reading about our case had helped her process her own grief and anger. She said she was glad we'd gotten justice, glad Helen had survived, glad we had Sophie. Your story matters, she wrote, because it shows that these things really happen, that the people we trust most can be the ones who hurt us worst, but also that we can survive it, we can rebuild. We can find new meaning in the ruins of what we thought our lives would be. I think about that a lot. About meaning. About survival. I thought I knew what my life would look like at 68 years old. I thought I'd be walking on beaches with Helen, traveling, enjoying the freedom that comes after 40 years of work. Instead, I'm raising a traumatized 10-year-old, managing my wife's medical appointments, and trying to rebuild a retirement fund from almost nothing. But here's what I've learned. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's not just about seeing Daniel and Vanessa behind bars, though I won't lie and say that doesn't bring me some satisfaction. Justice is about what comes after. It's about the opportunity to rebuild, to protect what's left, to make sure that the evil someone tried to do doesn't define the rest of your life. Helen will never fully recover from what they did to her. The brain damage from repeated hypoglycemia is permanent. Some days, she can't remember what happened 5 minutes ago. Some days, she looks at me with confusion in her eyes, and I have to remind her who I am, how long we've been married, why we're living in this little house in Okotoks instead of the home we raised our son in. But she remembers Sophie, always remembers Sophie, knows that little girl needs us, knows we're all that stands between Sophie and more foster homes, more uncertainty, more fear. That's what keeps us going. I don't forgive Daniel. I don't think I ever will. You don't forgive someone for slowly poisoning your wife, for stealing your life savings, for traumatizing your granddaughter. But I've stopped letting it consume me. I've stopped lying awake at night wondering what I did wrong, where I failed as a father, how I didn't see what he was becoming. Some people are just broken. Some people choose greed over love, money over family, cruelty over compassion. That's on them. That's their choice. Their burden to carry. Mine is to protect what's left. To give Sophie a childhood that doesn't revolve around fear and manipulation. To give Helen dignity and care in her declining years. To build something new from the wreckage of what we lost. Last week, Sophie came home from school with a drawing. It was our little house in Okotoks, with 3 stick figures in front of it. One tall with gray hair, one shorter with gray hair, one small with pigtails. All 3 were smiling, holding hands, with a big sun in the sky and flowers in the yard. "That's us," she said, showing it to Helen. "Our family." Helen put it on the refrigerator, right in the center where we'll see it every day. That's justice, I think. Not perfect, not what we'd planned, but real, honest, built on truth instead of lies, on love instead of greed. Daniel will be eligible for parole in 15 years. He'll be 53 years old. Vanessa will be out sooner, in about 10. Sometimes I wonder what that will be like, if they'll try to contact us, if they'll have learned anything, if they'll have changed. But mostly, I don't think about them at all anymore. I think about Sophie's soccer games, about helping her with her homework, about Helen's good days when she's sharp and present, and we can laugh together like we used to. I think about the small victories. Sophie sleeping through the night without nightmares, Helen remembering where she put her reading glasses, having enough money left over at the end of the month to take Sophie out for ice cream. These are the things that matter now. These are the things worth protecting. The detective, Sarah Chen, checks in on us sometimes. She worked elder abuse cases for years before moving to homicide, and she told me once that ours was the case that haunted her most. Not because of what happened, but because of what almost happened. If I hadn't found those insulin vials when I did, if the ambulance had been 10 minutes later, if Helen's blood sugar had dropped just a little bit more, she wouldn't have survived. "You saved her life," Detective Chen said, "by being suspicious, by searching, by not accepting the easy explanation that she was just sick." But I almost didn't. That's what keeps me up some nights. I almost believed them. Almost accepted that Helen was just declining, that it was bad luck, genetics, age. I almost signed over everything without question because Daniel was my son and I trusted him. That's the real lesson here, I suppose. The hardest one. That blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. That the people who can hurt you most are the ones you love most. That you have to protect yourself even from family, especially from family, because they're the ones who know exactly where you're most vulnerable. I wish I'd known that sooner. I wish I'd questioned more, trusted less, paid attention to the small signs that something was wrong. I wish a lot of things. But wishes don't change the past. They only inform the future. Sophie turns 11 next month. We're planning a birthday party, inviting some friends from her new school, kids who don't know her history, who just know her as the quiet girl who's really good at art. Helen's been practicing making birthday cakes with Sophie, teaching her the recipes that have been in our family for generations. Simple things, normal things, the kind of things that make a childhood. Sometimes Sophie asks me if I miss Daniel, if I wish things had turned out differently. Every day, I tell her honestly, I miss the son I thought I had, but that person never really existed. Or if he did, he made choices that turned him into someone else, someone I don't recognize, someone I can't have in our lives. Do you think he's sorry? She asks. I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so, for his sake. But it doesn't change anything. Sorry doesn't undo what happened. It doesn't give Grandma her health back. It doesn't return the money. It doesn't erase your nightmares. She nods, processing this. She's wise beyond her years, that girl, forced to grow up too fast. But still, a child who deserves a chance at normalcy. That's what we're trying to give her. That's our justice. The house is quiet tonight. Helen's already asleep, exhausted from a doctor's appointment this afternoon. Sophie's in her room, doing homework or drawing, or reading one of the library books we got her over the weekend. I'm sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea, writing this all down because someone suggested it might help, that telling the story might give it a shape, a meaning, a purpose, beyond just the pain. I don't know if it helps, but I know this. What Daniel and Vanessa did to us was evil, calculated, deliberate, cruel, but they didn't win. They took our money, they damaged Helen's health, they traumatized Sophie, they destroyed any chance of a relationship with their child or their parents. But they didn't take everything. We're still here, still standing, still building something worth protecting. That's the real revenge, I suppose. Not the prison sentences, though those matter. Not the public shame, though that's real too. The real revenge is survival, is choosing to move forward instead of being frozen in place by what they did, is creating meaning and purpose out of the wreckage. Helen is alive. Sophie is safe. We have each other. After everything, that's enough. More than enough. It's everything.